Hey everyone, and welcome to Political Capital, your best weekly BC politics podcast. You know it. That's why you subscribed. I don't even know why I tell you each and every week, but it is the best. You can get it on Apple, the Googletron, Podcast 5000, Podface, Podfairy. It goes on and on. We are on all the formats, and we're also reaching you here on Check TV on Sundays, as well as on the YouTubes as well. Thank you for joining us. We've got a lot to talk about this week. The legislature is in session. It's just broke for spring break, actually. Accomplished many different things that we're going to get into. And I want to quickly bring in the panel that you know each and every week as well. Joining us from across the province, including way up in Nelson, is Jillian Oliver. Jillian, thank you for being here. You're green strategist extraordinaire. We say it every week, but thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Katy Merrifield, also political strategist who's worked on many BC Liberal campaigns. Katy, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And Maclean K, editor of the Orca.ca. Thanks, Maclean.
Thank you. And you didn't mention that we're number one on Podface.
We are number one on Podface. There's only two things on Podface, and the other is a test feed. But that's okay. That is okay. We are on all the feeds that you can possibly think about. And this week, we are going to start with the issue of housing and homelessness. And this is one that we've kind of touched on a little bit in previous episodes, but we got a very clear indication from the province on what their homelessness and housing strategy is this week in Victoria. It picks up on Penticton, where we've talked about in the past, where the Attorney General's in a big kind of dogfight with the mayor of Penticton over homelessness. Not a fight in Victoria because, well, maybe different political reasons. But let's go around the table and talk about homelessness, housing, Victoria, Penticton, the provincial government. What's going on there? Katy, why don't you kick us off?
Yes. So for me, on the one hand, these tent cities are an out of control travesty. I think they need to be disbanded immediately. We have to halt the community violence as well as the inhumane conditions, living conditions for the residents there. But on the other, so as we've seen, this MOU that Rob is talking about means that they're proceeding to construction phase on a variety of these community homes immediately, which means that it bypasses a very necessary step of community and residents input. So this is an area that I find a little bit concerning. It's a bit of a dangerous precedent to set to consistently impose this type of provincial will. Ultimately, I do think that there's politics at play here. The NDP promised 114,000 units of housing over the next 10 years. They said that in 2017. So I took a look at the government's own numbers, and it appears that less than 16,000 have been built 4 years into a 10-year commitment. So that's not super impressive. And so perhaps that's why they're resorting to this more aggressive tactic. And then finally, I think politically, this is an easier fight in Victoria, obviously, than it is in Penticton, given the NDP dominance in Victoria area ridings. So even if there were community protests or outcry, should they occur, Victoria is a very safe region for the NDP electorally. So it makes sense that this is a bit of a test run.
Yeah, Katy brings up a good point there. The strategy clearly from the government is we will pay for housing, shelter, homeless, supportive housing in Victoria. But we are not going to sit there through the municipal council rezoning process. We're not going to wait months. We're not going to allow the Not in My Backyard Neighborhood Resident Association protest. We are bypassing that using the provincial powers, and we're building it. And that's kind of the quid pro quo here for allowing for the government to bring the money. The politicians have to kind of get out of the way. Maclean, what do you make of that?
I mean, you mentioned Victoria and the difference between Victoria and Penticton. For those of us who live in Victoria, this has been going on for a good year now. I'm on Pandora Avenue, and 2 blocks from here, there was a very large encampment, which caused grief for local residents, the grocery store workers across the street. It's gotten out of hand. To Katy's point, CUPE workers apparently refused to go into Beacon Hill Park months ago because they thought it was unsafe there. They had been threatened. So whatever the solution or solutions to the homelessness problem, I think in Victoria we've learned that 24/7 camping can't be part of the solutions. That doesn't mean that there isn't a need for greater investments in things like housing, but the entrenched camping, it doesn't work.
Yeah, at the start of the pandemic, 24/7 camping was the position of the city of Victoria. Just that's what has caused Beacon Hill Park and some other parks here to become tent cities. John Horgan went public by saying he didn't believe that was the right move, and he kind of took a swipe at the city council in Victoria. And now his government is at the table with tens and tens. We don't know exactly what's been spent. Tens and tens of millions of dollars buying up hotels, not just here in Victoria, in Vancouver. They just purchased a Ramada hotel on Pender. Lots of money going out the door on homelessness and low income and 24/7 wraparound supports. Jillian, what do you make of all of it?
Yeah, well, I think it's funny, like whether it was intentional or not, the 24/7 camping kind of like really shone a spotlight on it, and almost like you can draw a direct line to the urgency with which the province is acting now, I think. But being from Vancouver, and from Vancouver, you do see how sometimes the public consultation process is problematic and ends up being quite obstructionist and actually kind of backfiring and creating more opposition than there might otherwise would be to projects. But I think on the other hand, the province does have to kind of like walk a fine line, because they have to think about precedent, like Katy said, and what would this mean if it was a project that they opposed for different reasons when they were in opposition. It is different than Penticton. They've got the support of the local governments, and I think both levels of government have a mandate to deal with this issue. So I think it's a better way of doing it. They are trying to build in some consultation. There's a public engagement process. There's also going to be community advisory committees for each of the projects to engage local residents and make sure that their concerns are addressed. But I think it'll be interesting to see how it pans out for sure.
Yeah, that satisfaction or lack thereof of the public, the neighbors, the residents, where some of these 6 projects in Victoria are going to go. That's really where we're gonna get into the kind of part of this where the political heat's going to get ratcheted up a little bit. In some ways, it's smart politics in that it insulates the mayors from that. It protects a housing project from getting scuttled by a really powerful resident association. We're a year from municipal elections here in British Columbia next October, and I could just see some of these projects getting tied down in red tape and protests and public hearings and redevelopment and variances. Next thing you know, they're gone. And I guess this removes that. The mayors can say, well, I know you don't want this in your community, but it's not us. It's David Eby over there. Go get him. He doesn't care. So I guess there's smart politics in that, but it does set a precedent from the provincial government that we are going to solve homelessness by big-footing municipalities out of the way to get things built. And didn't work in Penticton, is working in Victoria. Will it work in Vancouver? There's a lot more political dynamics in place there too. I don't know, but it's I think we're gonna end up talking about it again because it's the most aggressive homelessness strategy I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. Let's move on to Toiletgate, where we are going to take this podcast straight into the gutter on the issue of the golden throne, the lavish loo. The much ado about a loo in Vancouver, actually, underneath the Cambie Street Bridge, a $645,000 public toilet in Vancouver's Cooper Park, which has caused some controversy in the legislature. The idea of that money from the provincial government's COVID relief economic infrastructure recovery program being spent on a super expensive toilet. Went as far as, I think, Fox News and the New York Post and a bunch of other international outlets. So let's go around the table on that, Maclean. What do you make, I guess, both of the issue and how it's kind of played out in the public?
Well, I mean, for how it's played out in the public, this often happens when you have a scandal, if you want to call it that, with a comparatively small amount of money. People can relate to $645,000 in a way they can't relate to, $1 billion overrun on how much does a hydroelectric dam cost? I have no idea. How much does building a school cost? It's not something you can reach out and touch. But a toilet is kind of like, Bev Oda's $12 or $15 orange juice. People understand how much an orange juice is supposed to cost. They understand how much a toilet should probably cost. $645,000 is worth more than this beautiful condo you see behind me, which, in point of fact, has 2 toilets.
Whoa.
And so you can
it's part of the 1%
luxury.
there.
Yeah. Exactly. So you can understand why people can relate to this in a way that they can't relate to, the deficit, the Site C cost, things like that.
Yeah. Does it matter that the details are that the toilet actually only costs $150,000 and that the remaining $500,000 is like infrastructure and sewer and lines and concrete? And you're right. I don't know if the public kind of cares about that, or they just see the big number and just go, Katy, how do you put it all together?
I take unfettered glee in this topic. No, I don't think the public does care about those details. They see the price tag, they see what it's for, and they get enraged. I want to talk about comms a little bit here, though. real like kudos to BC Liberal MLA Todd Stone for getting this covered, as Rob noted, in the New York Post, Fox, and even RussianWeek.ca, which was a
Whoa.
publication I was unfamiliar with up until yesterday. But like from my view, from the opposition's perspective, like I wouldn't have stopped there. Like I would have put forward a really robust digital strategy on this, get videos out on TikTok and Snapchat, amplify those, share them, do a fundraising e-blast to anyone that's ever signed up on a previous issue petition, throw out ads on Facebook and Instagram. There you're really reaching all of your target demographics. Like get your 22-year-old communications intern to whip up some memes, perhaps contrasting spending priorities or doing a cost per flush meme. Like this will be the best day of their life. And these moments are really rare as political staff where you can really take something like this and go with it. And as Maclean noted, billions of dollars in a government misstep is not tangible, but one piece of infrastructure, one toilet, which everyone knows what it is because they use it, that's costing $645,000 more than someone's home, like that resonates. And so if I were the opposition, I would have really grabbed this and went.
Yeah, the NDP tried to get out from under it before that could happen by trying to say, well, we didn't spend this money per se. It was grant applications from the city of Vancouver and the Parks Board, and they asked for it. We gave it to them. The end of all of this, we'll have an accounting of what it means and how it was spent. Yeah, it didn't really derail the lavish Lou headline that went across the world. But was there, Jillian, like, what did you make of how, I guess, both government kind of tried to move it and the opposition tried to push it and where it all went?
Well, you know what? I was gonna call a lid on this segment, but
Hey, that's my
hadn't
job.
heard I hadn't heard that it had been on Fox News, and I think I just want to say, like, on these kind of like relatively smaller spending like scandals in general, there's a reason why conservative media and conservative parties like it so much, is because it makes people angry and it makes people distrustful of government over relatively small things, and I think that we should all be, take that in context.
Yeah, it is
take that in context to amplify it. That's what she meant.
In context to blow it out of proportion.
Yes. Yes.
You're right though, Katie. Like we could have. I guess there could have been memes of John Horgan flushing bags of cash. Cartoon Horgan flushing bags of cash down a toilet or something. Not that he really had anything
John's crappy spending, like the narrative writes itself.
I guess so, yeah. And I'm sure the NDP would have found that unfair because he didn't spend it on a toilet. He just gave it to the city, and but that's politics. It's not necessarily fair, I guess.
And the NDP is amazing at this. Like, go back to years ago with the unfortunate, like the wacky renting comments. Like I watched the NDP's precision rollout on their comm strategy, and it was one that every political party should emulate. They hit all of their channels. It started with a statement in the House, then McElroy started tweeting, that kind of went viral. They did an e-blast. They had ads. They had memes. Like, come on, do that. It's good.
Yep. Yeah, it's an indication of, I guess, that the opposition Liberals are still finding their feet a little bit in opposition, and that they didn't seize on it that way. But I did think there was a pretty good line in question period at one point where I believe it was Todd Stone or someone said, if we could just take the toilet paper holder from this golden toilet and give it to a nonprofit group that can't get any grants, maybe they could survive for another year. Just sell that toilet paper holder for tens of thousands.
Todd's narrative was great. I just think they should have amplified it further.
Yeah, interesting. It's weird how those subjects just come out of nowhere and suddenly get a life of their own. And next thing you know, multiple question periods, discussion at the legislature on a golden toilet of all things. There is, I kind of want to see it now, to be honest. But I think there's one similar in Esquimalt that I might go check out, made by the Portland Loo Company, where it has like cleaning features and things so that it's not a really gross outdoor toilet. Anyways, I don't know. Well, I will go check it out and I'll report back on a future edition of the podcast. We'll take 21 of the 22 minutes to talk about toilets again, so it will be good. That was part of a legislature session that wrapped up this week with, I think, 11 bills passed. I couldn't honestly tell you what most of them did. It was not a spectacularly robust legislative session. It was weird. We've talked about it in the past where there's no budget, so a lot of MLAs were sitting around twiddling their thumbs, not quite sure what to do. There were a few things that came and went about, I don't know, there was bills on, a bill to make gender language neutral in other bills. There was a real estate bill, an ICBC bill, lots of other weird things. There was a lot of discussion on government's COVID relief, and government did move a little bit out on the small business grant program, on aid for transportation companies and bus companies and airports and things. But all in all, not sure the public was seized. Not that it is ever seized by the legislature, but not seized in this session. Did we take anything away from how it wrapped and how we look at the budget, which is going to be in just a couple of weeks now, Jillian?
I think I agree. It was like pretty underwhelming session. And I think the government really, like, what was remarkable to me, and obviously I have a personal feelings about this because of having to run a campaign during the snap election. But they really raised the stakes on themselves. They insisted that they needed a mandate to do all this stuff, to implement all these great plans. And then we kind of just saw like not much. Even the biggest thing that they sort of started the session with, the rent freeze, was a continuation of plans under the minority government and the rental housing task force that the Greens worked on with them. So I think, now the stakes are even higher for the budget. Presumably that's what they've been sort of saving all of their, big plans for. But, I think it was disappointing. I had hoped that at least having gone through all of that as a province, we'd have something more to show for it.
Mm-hmm. What did you make of it, Katie?
That's a really good point by Jillian in terms of promises made and promises not kept. I like that. For me, I've worked in government for 12 years, but honestly, personally, I feel like watching almost any legislative proceeding is about as exciting as watching water boil. But my observations, I thought the rent freeze bill was a smart tactic by the NDP to open up the session, just because it's a bit of a natural wedge with the BC Liberals. So I thought that was effective. On the other hand, I think the NDP proved yet again they're not completely infallible with that horrendous day one vaccine rollout. We've seen a return to normalcy in the House. You see the BC Liberals really holding the government to account, like throwing shots as they should.
And the Greens as well.
Refreshing. And the Greens as well. And then just a brief note on the supply bill, which ended the session. That was one of the finest displays of hypocrisy that I've seen on both sides of the House. So the NDP, when they were in opposition, used to scream bloody murder whenever the BC Liberals would invoke closure on a bill. And now all of a sudden it's nothing to see here. And on the flip side, the BC Liberals used to say, this is a routine measure once intelligent and sufficient debate has concluded. And now all of a sudden it's a violation of the institution of democracy. So there's a lot of hyperbolic rhetoric closing off that supply bill, which I just found entertaining.
Yeah, I called it on Twitter. I was like, time is a flat circle. We're just destined to repeat these things again and again. And what supply means for readers or for listeners and viewers is, you debate stuff in the legislature until the government that has the majority says, I'm kind of done with this. I don't like this anymore. I'm going to use my power to pass a motion that cuts everything off. Just puts a time on a day, which was Thursday at like 3:30 in the afternoon. That's it. We're done at 3:30. Call the vote. And, if you're in the opposition, you say, well, that's not fair. I still have lots of things to say. And the government says, no, I think democracy has served its purpose here. So that used to be something John Horgan in particular hated. He would just be irate at that when he was in opposition. But now it's a great way to get out from under a bunch of debate you'd rather not have in the House. So the more things change, the more they stay the same. But I thought, as a session, I guess, if I was to put it in the NDP's defense, maybe, and we've talked about this before, COVID just takes over everything. Maybe this session was not what the NDP intended to do because they're just continuing to roll with the punches on COVID. They're trying to put their effort into the mass vaccination. They're trying to do a bunch of other things. Maybe that just leaves them unable to execute a robust agenda as a new majority government, despite saying they had one in the election. Maybe that's coming. I don't know. I'm not sure, but it was I think, objectively weak session with not much in it. Made me wonder why we were there. And I'm looking for a budget that is going to have a lot of vision in it. Otherwise, we go right back to Jillian's point, which is, what did we have an election for without a plan or an agenda to the public? Where is that? Where is the evidence of that? So I thought, Jillian, you made a great point there that the NDP set themselves up with a little bit of little bit of room to fail there. But let's move on to close the show here on the video portion with our hot take. We're going to go around the table here in a minute. Lots of vaccination news, lots of promising vaccination news that maybe we're all going to get the jab by Canada Day. Raises the question, can we be traveling later this year? Can we travel in the summer? What is your comfort level on traveling? Do you think even if you got the shot, would you be out there heading off to Mexico or elsewhere? Let's go around the table. Jillian.
Probably not that far, but as long as it's, compliant with public health orders, I would travel within Canada. I've got a brother in Montreal. I would do that if that province is finished its vaccine rollout as well, but I probably wouldn't go further than the States, and maybe not even that.
Yeah. What about you, Katy?
I will 100% travel as soon as we are allowed to do so. I will also stay within Canada first so we can help our badly hurt tourism industry.
Yeah. Maclean?
I would travel to Canada or the U.S. In fact, the U.S. might turn out to be objectively safer in terms of vaccination in a few months. But yes, later this summer, if things keep going the way they look, I'd travel.
Yeah. I'm guessing the cost of travel is going to go through the roof the minute that we're allowed to go. It'll just suddenly it'll go from an industry that is begging you to take a flight right now to we don't have any flights left. So this flight here is 10 times the price. Come on board. It'll be a wild adventure. And I wonder, how we will do here in British Columbia with tourism if some people aren't traveling, but people are traveling here. Is there going to be any weird feelings about watching a whole bunch of Americans arrive who've been double vaccinated and we're still on one dose? I don't know, but we will watch for that for sure. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the audio version of the podcast. We got a lot more to talk about, and we will see you next week on Political Capital. Thanks for watching.
More episodes of Political Capital are available at checknews.ca/podcasts or search Political Capital wherever you listen to podcasts.